Hey, if you're new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It would really mean a lot to me, and honestly, it'd make my day. If you already did, thank you so much. Oh, and by the way, if you like listening to fan fiction, check out my other channel. The link's in the description.
Marine? Never, by Samrit. Luffy was kidnapped by Garp just after Ace and Sabo left to be pirates. Of course, Luffy doesn't agree to become a Marine. So do Ace and Sabo. A fight for freedom will break out. Involving a few destroyed Marine bases, the Whitebeard pirates, Garp's Fist of Love, Straw Hat pirates, and, of course, the three brothers causing chaos. Luffy being a Marine? Never. Adios.
Marine? Never. Chapter 8 The Whitebeard pirates stared at the two brothers crouching together in the middle of the deck, giving them the feeling of as if they were plotting something. But no matter how much these two seemed to want to make their discussion secret, their stage whispering was pretty much heard by everyone. Sabo, you don't think the old geezer knows that we? Haruta said his base is destroyed. He has some kind of anger issue. But destroying his own base? Ace, we're talking about the old geezer. The Whitebeards looked at each other and back at the two who were still ignoring their surroundings. Suddenly Haruta hopped forward, sitting cross-legged down next to Sabo. I heard that a newbie running from Garp did the damage mostly. Wouldn't be a surprise. The crazy old man nearly destroyed half of a forest looking for us once. Ace answered, nodding to himself as he crossed his arms. Oh, so you know Garp then? Haruta asked innocently, looking to and fro between Sabo and Ace. No, Sabo laughed. I wish it's only no. He is our grandfather. Ace shivered. Technically he is only yours and Lou, Sabo thought out loud. We are brothers, so that makes him your grandfather too. Ace answered, giving the dull look. Wait. Thatch started as he sat down next to Ace. Garp the Fist, hero of the Marines, is your grandfather? Finally both Sabo and Ace noticed that they weren't sitting alone anymore. They shortly exchanged looks before they both let out a sigh and nodded. Just after they did that, Whitebeard started to laugh out loudly, and so did some of the other crew members, confusing the two. Who would have thought that two of the kids Garp always complained about end up on our ship? Vista laughed. Complained about? Sabo asked while Ace stared at them, his mind still progressing what was going on. Garp and Oyaji often meet up to drink some sake together in peace. Thatch answered, slinging one arm around Ace's shoulder. Once he gets drunk enough, he starts complaining about his three grandkids. Sabo and Ace looked at each other from the corner of their eyes. The blonde looked back at the others again. They meet to drink sake? Together? Bwahahahahahahaha. I can't wait for the next time now. Whitebeard laughed out as he took a sip from his sake bottle, ignoring the disapproving look from the nurse next to him. It's about time he comes by again anyway. I haven't seen him for a year now. The two brothers stood there quietly watching the rest of the crew exchanging stories of when they saw Garp drunken before something in Ace's mind made click. Grabbing his hair in panic, he turned to Sabo, his eyes wide. The old geezer. We had to get away from here, before he comes by. Ace yelled loudly, causing the rest of the crew to pay attention to them again. As realization also came to Sabo, the blonde rushed over to the next navigator and grabbed him by the collar. Change the curse. Anything. Just don't let that crazy old man get anywhere near here. Sabo also yelled in the poor pirate's face, which caused confusion under the pirates, since usually he was the calmer, more level-headed one between these two. Whitebeard raised one eyebrow as he eyed his two sons. What makes you say that, sons? We don't have time to explain. Just let us get as far away as possible. Ace shouted in panic as he looked over his shoulder out onto the sea every few seconds. We can explain. Really, just trust us on this one. Sabo said, much calmer now, but still panic was clearly in his voice. Marco stepped up to the two as he crossed his arms. Why should we? Garp only comes to drink sake with Oyaji, not to arrest us, yoi. Ace and Sabo stared at Marco as if he had grown a second head. That's why we need to get away. In a flash the two run of underdeck, coming back out seconds later with two backpacks. Ace, get the striker ready. We need to get away, Sabo yelled as he ran off into the opposite direction. On it, Ace yelled as he tried to unknot the rope which tied the striker to the Moby. The white-beard crew watched curiously how the two brothers got ready to leave the ship for a while before they were stopped by Marco, Thatch, Namur and Vista blocking their way to get on the striker. "Would you two please explain what this is about, Yoi?" Marco asked slowly as he crossed his arms. "We would like to know what this is about," Thatch added as Namur and Vista nodded in agreement. The two brothers glanced at each other as they dropped on the ground sitting there stage whispering to each other again. "Do you think we should tell them? If the crazy old geezers show up here regularly we better do." "Yay, but I don't really want to remember, but just image when that crazy bastard finds us here. Hell will break loose and his fist of love, yes. So to prevent that we should tell them." Coming to a conclusion, the two stood up again, turning to the rest of the crew that sweat dropped at their behavior. "Let's just say we are on momentary very bad terms with that crazy old man." "Momentary very bad terms?" Haruta questioned. "Well, you see, he kinda Abu raised us when we were kids." Ace started correcting himself in mid-sentence. "Well, that is what grandfathers usually do, right?" Haruta tilted her head to the side. "Yay. What's so bad about being raised by him?" Thatch asked, completely clueless why these two panicked. Honestly, what was so bad about being raised by a marine hero? "Well, he doesn't like the idea of us being pirates," Sabo finished, deciding that was enough for them to know for now. "Well, he is a marine, so no surprise there," Marco countered as he still watched the two, trying to figure out what they are not willing to tell. "Grua ha 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 ha." Whitebeard suddenly laughed out loud, shocking the two boys. "That sounds interesting, tell us more, sons." Unwillingly Ace and Sabo went over to Whitebeard muttering something about the need of getting to a new location first as Haruta giggled lightly, whispering over to Izo. "Think we should tell them that Garp won't show up anytime soon since he is busy with repairing his base." Izo chuckled lightly as he shook his head. "Let's wait till they told us more." "Oh!" Luffy cried out loudly as he rubbed the new bump on his head. "Stop hitting me." Zephyr shook his head as he pushed the boy down on a sitting position on the ground again, then dodge. "How am I supposed to dodge when I don't see anything?" Luffy nearly yelled as he pulled away the blindfold from his eyes. "You sensed the hit before I landed," Zephyr answered as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Thought Luffy only stared up at him blankly. "Look, boy. You have not awakened your haki yet." Luffy was about to say something before Zephyr stopped him. "And since I tried over 30 times to explain you about the 3 types, we are just going to try awakening it through intense training. You are not going to throw me into an endless pit, a jungle, the ocean, tie me on balloons, make me fight monkeys or beat me down with a fist of love, right?" Luffy asked, fear showing in his eyes, and for the first time Zephyr wondered what kind of training the boy had before. "No, but I asked someone to come here for a week to train with you. I still need permission for that thought," the purple-haired marine said, deep in thoughts, not noticing how Luffy slowly crawled away. "Ow!" Luffy cried out once more as he held his head and stared at the older marine that towered behind him. "Did Ji-chan teach you his fist of love, or why does it hurt every time you hit me?" "That boy is called Haki, more specific Busashuku no Haki, a light version." Zephyr smirked down at the boy before him, adjusting his sunglasses. "Originally it is a force created similar to an invisible armor. By coating your body or certain parts of your body makes these parts denser and formidable. Plus it gives greater power to your attacks. It can bypass your devil fruit ability easily, depending on how much you concentrate or not." As if to prove his point, Zephyr crouched down and flicked Luffy's forehead, causing the boy to cry out in pain once more. "This was only a small amount used. If I use more it's physically visible. You remember when my fist turned black and I smashed that stone pillar? That was also Busashuku no Haki." Luffy nodded his head in understanding, still holding on to his forehead. "When am I going to learn that?" The marine chuckled. "Not anytime soon." Luffy pouted hearing these words and gave the marine his puppy dog eyes. "But I want to learn now." Earning other Haki-infused hit on the head caused Luffy stop pouting but to try not to whine about the pain while the purple-haired marine crossed his arms staring down at the raven-haired. "We need to awake your Haki first before any real training can even start." Having enough, Luffy sprung up on his feet, glaring up at the taller marine. "Then why were you hitting me with a stick for over 2 hours?" Zephyr shrugged. "Trying to see if that could awake your Kenbunshoku no Haki." The raven-haired stared at him blankly. Kenbu, what? The Marine sighed. The ability to sense the presence of others and to predict an opponent's moves shortly before they make them, even without visibly seeing them. Luffy looked up at him in confusion. And hitting me with a stick is supposed to make me learn that? Yes. If Zephyr had known that teaching the boy about hockey would have been so difficult, he would have never started with it. Even the youngest of his students had understood the principle of it faster than this boy. Suddenly Luffy stuck his pinky in his nose, looked at Zephyr bored. That's just an excuse so you can hit me. And why would you think that? Zephyr asked, irritated. Because Ace used to kick me down trees, excusing it as training until Sabo stopped him, Luffy answered. The Marine rubbed his eyes tiredly before pushed the boy down in a sitting position again and blindfolded him. Just do what I say, boy. Hey, why show ow? Stop that, dodge it, how am I ow? Stop talking and dodge. Stop hit ow, concentrate. Ho ow, can you ow? Stop it ow, hey ow. I am hunger ow. Start dodging, boy. Bogart stood by the sidelines trying to focus on the newspaper he tried to read, but his attention was drawn every so often back to Luffy's training, or more specific to Luffy's cries of pain. Shaking his head, the Marine tried once more to focus on the paper again, ignoring the bickering of the two as best as he could. Food, ow. You can eat when training is over. Would you all please stop laughing? Ace yelled, his face red from both embarrassment and anger as he watched the whole Whitebeard crew laughing. Aw, come on Ace, it's not all day we hear so funny stories from the childhood of you two. Thatch laughed as he patted Ace's shoulder, but the raven-haired boy just slapped the hand away. It is not funny. It is traumatizing, Sabo answered, uncomfortable as he rubbed his neck, trying to forget pieces of memories from Garp's training. I feel sorrier for your little brother. He lived with crazy old Garp longer than you guys did. Marco chuckled, slightly happy to have found a new way he could punish the boys when their pranks went too far. Well, Lou did tell us a few things that Garp called training, Ace mumbled. Like letting him fight monkeys? Who in their right mind would let a 4-year-old fight monkeys? Haruta gasped as she visibly shook from the image of a small kid fighting monkeys. I knew that man was crazy, but that crazy, Vista mumbled quietly. Wahahahahahahahaha. That's good old Garp. Whitebeard laughed as he drank from his sake. Sue, Oyaji, you get now why we need to get away from here? Ace asked hopefully, but the pirate captain only grinned down at him. As long as you're on my ship, you don't need to fear Garp. The brothers exchanged looks, but it was clear that they were still not convinced. As much as we want to believe you, Oyaji, fact is, the old geezer won't let anything stop him punish us. Especially with the way Ace used to say as kid that he was going to take your head. Sabo added. Garp always thought that Ace would do that as Marine, and now. You're our Oyaji, what will that crazy man think? He will hunt you down. Thatch stated bluntly. Correct. Now image him finding us on the Moby. The blonde told his friend, and soon the cook drifted off into deep thoughts, shivering ever now and then. You know, Haruta piped in. I think Garp had too much to do with the newbie right now than to care about us being close by. Haruta is right. Vista agreed. Besides that, why don't we take a trip to the East Blue? I want to meet the little brother of these two. Marco shook his head. Don't you think it will cause a mass panic if they hear about the Whitebeards being in the East Blue? Wahahahahahahahaha. A little trip sounds good. That little brother of yours sure sounds interesting. Whitebeard agreed to Marco's dismay. On the way there we can check up on some of our islands and get some of the good sake from one of the blues again. Cheering, everyone agreed on the trip to the Blue Seas, causing Ace and Sabo to sigh in relief by getting as far away from Garp as they could, and at the same time they couldn't help but feel happy about seeing their little baby brother sooner than they thought again. To the East Blue, the two yelled, cheering with the others. Spandam leaned back in his chair as he eyed the Marine Admiral before him. The Admiral was sitting there. His aura alone was enough to send shivers down Spandam's back. The chief of the CP9 shifted around uncomfortable in his seat as he leaned even more into his chair. What makes you think I am letting one of my best agents go for a week? I had no intention on even giving permission to use one of them. Since they all are working in very important undercover mission. Get someone else for this assassination mission. Spandam sunk back deeper in his chair as he met the eyes of the Admiral before him. I am not asking. The Admiral answered. I am ordering you to do it. Spandam slammed his hands on his desk, his fear momentary forgotten. "WHO said I am taking orders from you?" The Admiral's eyes narrowed down on Spandam and the CP9 chief cowered back into his chair. "It's all in the name of absolute justice. I am not ordering this for the purpose this fool asked for. I am ordering this as a secret assassination mission. As easy as you make it sound, it is not possible before I get the okay from the world government." Spandam answered, slightly nervous. "As much as I want to agree with absolute justice, I can't. You are getting the permission from me. This is a top-secret mission from a Marine Admiral for the greater good of absolute justice and the future safety of the world. Are you trying to object?" Spandam shook in fear. "No sir. But, then do as I say. Send Rob Lucci. No one is allowed to know about this mission. This talk never officially happened." With these words the Admiral left the room without further explaining, leaving behind a shaken Spandam. As soon as the door to his office closed, Spandam slammed his hands on his desk once more. "WHO, the hell does he think to order me around? Does damn Marine Admirals think they are so great? WHO care about them? I am in charge here and my word is rule." Huffing slightly out of breath, the CP9 chief reached down to the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a small Den Mushi. It ringed a few times before it was answered. "Yes sir. Khalifa? Make sure Lucci gets a week of vacation in his undercover job. There is something I need him to do." "Yes sir." The line went dead again as Spandam put the Den Mushi back. "Damn those admirals, if he risks the undercover mission I will complain about him to the world government. Why can't he find someone else for this stupid mission?" Marine? Never. Chapter 9 100 Reviews Special. Okay. That's it for today. Take a break now, boy. Zephyr said as he looked at the raven-haired boy laying on the ground, arms and legs stretched out and panting heavily. Luffy rubbed his eyes tiredly as he sat up, struggling to make out Bogart clearly, who was approaching the boy. Luffy placed his straw hat on top on his head before he fell back onto the ground snoring loudly. "Ace, Sabo, meat," the raven-haired mumbled quietly. "Tisk. Not even in his sleep he will stop thinking about food." Zephyr said, a small smile on his lips as he looked down on the sleeping boy. 6 years ago, Mount Kalubo, Ace, Sabo. Wait up, 8 years old Luffy shouted loudly as he ran through the forest. "I am hungry. Let's get some meat." Before the small boy could shout anything more he was slammed into the ground by an unknown force from above. "Shush, be quiet already." "Achi." Luffy mumbled into the ground, trying to make eye contact with his brother Ace. "Nung, get off." "Ace." A third voice was heard, and soon after a blonde boy not older than 11 also jumped down from a tree. "It's too late, the boar got away." Grumbling, Ace stood up and hit his little brother on the head. "See, now it got away because of you, idiot." "That was not my fault." Luffy yelled loudly as he finally was able to get up. "Yes, it was. You were yelling too much," the older raven yelled back in equal volume. "You left me behind. Not my fault you couldn't keep up. You took that way on purpose, it was the easiest way to get closer. But you knew I can't keep up there, not my problem." Sabo sighed as Luffy and Ace head-butted each other, completely forgetting the world around them. "Come on you two, stop it. You're just too weak. I am not. I am getting stronger. You can even keep up." The blonde massaged his temples. Sometimes it really was hard to handle these two hotheads. "Ace, Luffy, stop before. You're my big brother, you're supposed to help me." "Yeah, well, maybe I don't want to anymore." "What do you mean?" "What I said." "Crap," Sabo muttered. "Okay, enough now. We can still." "Fine, then I don't want to be your brother also anymore." "Fine." Before Sabo could finish his sentence, both Ace and Luffy took off in opposite direction, leaving him behind alone in the clearing. "Oh, just great." Sabo didn't really know what he should do now. He wasn't sure if he should go after Luffy or Ace. He knew once both calmed down they would be able to pull together again. Thought the blonde boy knew his brothers. Ace was a stubborn hothead. He knew that once the raven had calmed down he would regret what he said, but too proud to actually apologize. Instead he would probably try to find another way to make up with their little brother. Most of the time Ace would come back with some meat for Luffy after a fight, and most of the time Sabo was the one to give Ace a little push to do that. Luffy was also stubborn and hot-headed, but not as bad as Ace. Once Luffy understood his mistake he would apologize under tears. But even he was sometimes too proud to do that, but at least he would always come to him to ask for advice of what he should do now. Sabo was pretty sure that ever since he rejoined them the fights between Luffy and Ace became less still. This was one of the worst outcomes of all the fights they had so far. It was the first time he ever heard Ace doubt their brotherhood since he came back. Sabo knew perfectly that both didn't mean what they said, but still. He didn't like this particular fight that happened only because a boar got away. Deciding to go after Luffy first, Sabo made his way through the woods. After around half an hour, the blonde finally found his little brother. He was sitting by the river, alone. One point Sabo already didn't like. In his eyes, Luffy was way too clumsy sometimes. That why Ace and he had silently agreed to never let Luffy be alone when he is near deep waters where he could drown. Sabo stopped himself as he heard Luffy's muttering. Stupid Ace, saying stupid stuff like that. Luffy sniffed and the blonde instantly knew that their little brother was crying. Stupid big brother, I am not weak, I will show him. Sabo watched wide-eyed how Luffy suddenly jumped up and rushed back into the forest. I will catch that boar. Luffy, wait. Sabo cried out as he ran after the little boy, but he soon lost sight of him. Letting out a long sigh, the blonde scratched his head. Great, I should look for Ace now then. Looking in the direction his little brother disappeared into, he turned around and started looking for Ace. After a while it turned out that finding Ace was harder than it was to find Luffy. Thinking of where Sabo could find the older raven, he leapt from tree to tree before he finally got closer to the little cliff they often hang around to rest or talk about important stuff. Thought I would find you here, Sabo said as he stepped out of the woods, finding the raven sitting there with his back to him. Ace had pulled his knees up, hiding his face behind them as he didn't look up. I said something awful, Sabo. The blonde sighed as he stopped a meter away from Ace. You certainly did. Ace muttered out a low, not helping, before he looked up, his eyes fixed on the faraway horizon. I didn't mean what I said, I just. Lou knows that. Sabo cut in. He may be an idiot, but even he knows that you would never really mean what you said there. Ace looked at Sabo from the corner of his eyes. But what if he doesn't? You know that I treasure. I know, and I do that too, and so does Luffy. He won't hate you because of some stupid words. Come on, let's go back and find him before he hurts himself. Sabo saw that Ace wasn't really convinced. He knew that without real proof Ace wouldn't believe him that easily. Lou is more worried about the fact that you called him weak. So he went to try to catch that boar. Smirking, the blonde noticed that Ace's ears twitched. But the raven didn't say a thing, so Sabo turned around ready to leave. You know how clumsy he is. He probably will get himself in some trouble or eaten by something else than a crocodile. He watched how Ace's whole body twitched. Or even get hurt by trying to prove that he is not weak. A gust of wind went past Sabo and the blonde smiled, running after his brother, catching up with him easily. He knew perfectly how to trigger Ace's big brother instinct. The only after effect now was the Sabo too was pretty much as worried as Ace about their little brother. Both boys run aimlessly through the forest, searching through all the areas they used to hunt and were known by Luffy too. After hours of searching they stopped in a small clearing, panting slightly. This isn't good, Ace muttered. Where did that idiot go to? Ace, it's getting dark. Sabo uttered, worried thick in his voice as the blonde stared up at the red turning sky. Let's keep. Ace stopped mid-sentence as a blood-curdling, way too familiar scream echoed in the forest. Luffy! They both cried out as they rushed into the direction they heard it from. Sabo felt his blood run cold as they heard nothing was heard anymore after that scream. He didn't want to image could possibly have happened to their little brother. At the same time he also felt guilt building up in him. Thoughts of whatever happened could have been prevented if he had just tried better to follow their little brother. He glanced at Ace. The blonde knew already from the raven's expression that he also felt guilty, knowing that if his fight with Luffy hadn't gone so far, the little boy would be with them right now. Finally they reached the clearing by the river the scream came from. Holding up their pipes they both stormed out of the tree line into it, ready to beat down whatever hurt their little brother, only to find said little boy sitting on top of a beaten up boar, grinning widely down at them. Look Ace, Sabo. I caught the boar. I am not weak, the little boy laughed, pumping his fist into the air. Sabo noticed the shape Luffy was in. He frowned as he saw the small cuts covering his little body and started to wonder which of these caused Luffy to scream like that. Lou, are you okay? Those are a lot of cuts. Ace not too frowned, also sensing that something was not right but choose not to say anything about that yet. Hey Luffy, about earlier. Sabo eyed Ace as he watched his brother try to apologize to the younger one. The blonde turned back to look at the younger raven-haired as he suddenly noticed how Luffy swayed a little back and for after he stood up on the boar. Luffy? He asked quietly but then watched in horror how the eyes of their little brother closed and he fell backwards off the boar rolling in the direction of the river. Catch him! Sabo cried out as he and Ace rushed forward to get their little brother before he would fall into the river. Deciding to jump the last meter, Ace managed to get a hold of their little brother right before he would touch the water. Sabo, is he okay? Ace yelled in panic as he held their little brother tightly, fearing the worst. He is, just exhausted, Sabo sighed in relief as he examined the little boy. But we should treat the cuts before they can get infected. Nodding in understanding, Ace carefully with the help of Sabo placed Luffy on his back to carry him back to the tree house. Before they left the clearing he nodded into the direction of the dead boar. What about that? Sabo looked from Ace to the boar and back at Ace. We can get that later. Nodding once again, Ace started to walk Sabo right next to him carrying their pipes. They walked quietly next to each other before Ace started to talk. You know, I can't believe Luffy caught it. Sabo laughed lightly. Yay! Who would have thought our baby brother could do that already? It was a pretty big one too. Ace mumbled deep in thought and Sabo glanced at him. Well, he isn't as weak as he used to be. The blonde smiled as he saw Ace smirk. Yay, but still not as strong as we are. Both laughed quietly before they both looked at their little brother who was sleeping on Ace's back. You know Sabo, I am kinda proud of him. Sabo smirked and as Ace registered what he said he narrowed his eyes on the blonde. Don't you dare to ever tell him I said that. Sabo only laughed, patting his brother's shoulder. Don't worry, I won't. MNG. Luffy suddenly mumbled and they both stopped to stare at him, waiting if he was going to wake up or not. Ace, Sabo, meet. Hearing that, both boys looked at each other before they broke out laughing. Always thinking of food, that idiot. Ace chuckled as he readjusts Luffy on his back. Sabo laughed. Once we got you home we will get the boar and grill you some meat, Lou. Unknown to the two, the sleeping boy smiled peacefully as he snuggled closer onto his brother's back. Yo, Ace, Sabo, wake up. Thatch's voice ranged through the brothers' ears as they slowly woke up from their sleep. Thatch, your voice is still loud, so shut up, Ace grumbled as he sat up. Next to him was Sabo who rubbed the tiredness out of his eyes. What do you want, Thatch? Sabo asked as he finally was fully awake while Ace looked like he was going to fall back into sleep any second again. Just telling ya that dinner is ready. Thatch shrugged as he left the two again. Guess we should get going then. Stretching his tiered legs, Sabo looked over at his brother who finally was also standing up again. Noticing a gentle smile on his face. Dreamed something good? More of a memory. Ace mumbled as he searched for his hat. Bet Lou is still not stronger than we are. Sabo chuckled, having the feeling that they had dreamed about the same memory. Yep. Ace chuckled now too. He is probably hunting for some meat now. And will probably beat the poor animal up in a matter of seconds. Sabo smiled. If he is especially hungry. He is our idiot little brother, what do you expect? Ace smiled too as they both walked to the canteen of the ship. That we will be proud of him anyway. Sabo smirked as Ace punched his arm lightly. Would you let go of that already? The raven-haired asked, slightly embarrassed. You said you won't tell him? Won't tell him, but maybe Haruta or Marco would like to hear that story. Sabo answered, laughing, and walked off while Ace just stared at him. Oh come on, Sabo. Sabo, Sabo, Ace yelled as he ran after his blonde brother, trying to make sure he won't tell anything. Far away in the Grand Line on a marine base of an admiral lay a raven-haired boy. His straw hat was covering half his face as he slept in the middle of the training grounds. Slowly his chest fell and rose with every calming breath he took. Ace, Sabo, meet. The boy mumbled quietly and a peaceful and gentle smile formed on his lips. Marine? Never. Chapter 10. Luffy panted heavily as he jumped to the side. The wall behind him crumbled down into pieces. The straw-hatted boy narrowed his eyes on the man a few meters in front of him. Taking a deep breath, Luffy fixed his eyes on him and went ahead to attack the man. Gomu Gomu no, bazooka. The man dodged easily, disappearing momentarily from Luffy's sight before he reappeared behind him, kicking Luffy hard in the side, slamming him against the next wall. Luffy didn't even get time to register what happened as he was held up on his throat staring into the black eyes of the man. His right hand was drawn back, only one finger was pointing at him. Luffy grabbed onto the arm that held him up, his fingers trying to dig into its skin while his legs trashed to kick his opponent. Slowly Luffy's eye wandered to the finger that pointed at him. Thoughts of how he should dodge that rushed through his mind. His eyes then met the man's eyes. Confusion momentary was shown in Luffy's eyes before he recognized the cold stare they held. "Shigen," the man said lowly, and Luffy's eyes widened seeing that the man was aiming for his chest, but before he could land the hit a third person grabbed the hand, stopping the attack successfully. "That's enough, Lucci," Zephyr said sternly, his eyes hidden by the sunglasses, but the thin line his lips built already told that he was not pleased by the CP9 agent's methods. "I told you before. You're supposed to train with him, not to kill him." Lucci's eyes, who were till now fixed on Luffy, traveled over to look at the older Marine shortly before he let go of Luffy and stepped back. A white pigeon landed on his shoulder and Lucci bowed his head a little. "My apology. I got caught up in the situation." Zephyr eyed the agent. He didn't really believe his words. Lucci was after all one of the top agents of the CP9. He rarely made any mistakes or got caught up in the moment. Luffy's coughing snapped the Marine out of his thoughts and he kneeled down to the boy who massaged his neck. "Are you okay, boy? You should take a break now. We will continue in 2 hours." Zephyr told him as he patted the boy's shoulder, but was surprised as Luffy shook his head. "I can keep going." The raven-haired boy glared up at Lucci. "I will beat him." Luffy nearly growled as Lucci smirked down at him. For some reasons Luffy didn't like Lucci anymore. In the beginning he had found him pretty cool. He found it amazing that the pigeon was kind of talking for him, but now he couldn't stand this man anymore. He felt it, the killing aura. More than once he had clearly noticed the intent to kill in his attack. Luffy wasn't blind. He knew when people mean to kill. He had seen it often enough at the Grey Terminal. Blue Jam and other corrupted people had shown it. Even with Ace and Sabo trying to not let him see it, he knew what it felt like, and he clearly felt it coming from that man. The only thing Luffy didn't understand was why this man who was supposed to train with him would want to kill him. He thought Zephyr only wanted to go through intense training. Or maybe it was part of his training. Luffy shook his head as he stood up, dusting off his torn trousers. His red vest was already torn into pieces. Placing his straw hat back on top of his head, he glared at Lucci. "Just you wait. I will beat you." Lucci smirked slightly, enjoying the fight a little, even though Luffy wasn't much of a problem for him. He still had 4 days left before his mission should be completed. Spandam's words were still fresh in his mind. "You have 1 week to kill Monkey D. Luffy during the training season. No one is to know about this assassination mission. You also have to make it look like an accident. If you get caught, no one will take responsibility. If you will get questioned, well, just don't get caught." Lucci was never one to question his assignments, but he couldn't help but question why this small mission was interrupting his current undercover mission, which was probably of more importance than this. Zephyr watched the stare down between Luffy and Lucci. He knew something wasn't right. This was the 20th close call where he had to stop Lucci during their training. Luffy was slowly showing signs of haki, so that was nothing he was all too worried about, but still. He didn't mean for this intense training to be close calls of death. Heck, Zephyr was pretty sure Garp would make his life hell if he let the young boy die like that. "No, get some rest, we will continue later," Zephyr said sternly, placing a hand on Luffy's shoulder and guiding him away from the training field, all the while also keeping an eye on Lucci. Luffy did the same. He did not once take his eyes off Lucci, as if he was expecting him to attack from behind once he takes his eyes off him. "You take some rest too," Zephyr shouted over to the agent before he completely left the training grounds with a grumbling preteen. While guiding the raven-haired boy back to his room, he noticed Kuzan leaning against a wall, in a spot where he could have watched the whole training. Zephyr glanced at him, telling him wordlessly to meet him later. "Nay, purple-haired G-san." Zephyr looked down, seeing a very serious expression for the first time on the boy's face. "Why did you choose Pigeon Dude to train with me?" "I didn't exactly choose him. I only requested one of them. They sent Rob Lucci. He is one of the best, and for the intense training, I thought that getting him is better than nothing. Zephyr watched how Luffy kept on thinking deeply, his eyebrows furrowed, but then his stomach growled. Luffy stuck out his tongue and held his stomach. All that thinking and training is making me hungry. The older Marine chuckled. Get changed and grab something to eat then. Grinning from ear to ear, Luffy nodded and ran off, all the seriousness that hung in the air before forgotten. Once he was out of sight, Zephyr's eyes turned serious. So he is noticing it too, the Marine mumbled quietly as went to meet up with Kuzan. I still don't get why you have to go right now. Ace spoke stubbornly, crossing his arms as he glared at Thatch. Well, someone has to look what's going on there, and since the island isn't far from here, Thatch shrugged before he smiled sheepishly. My division didn't have any action in a while. I fear we will get out of practice if we don't get something else than cooking and taking care of food to do. Sabo sighed as he patted Ace's shoulder, pushing him lightly out of the way so he got some room. Don't mind him, Thatch. He is just grumpy about the delay. I am not grumpy, Ace shouted, but was shot down by the laughers of the Whitebeard pirates, causing the freckled teen to mutter some curse words. Oh come on Acey boy. I will be back soon and we can get back on track to the East Blue. Thatch laughed before he grinned at Ace, who in turn just gave him the cold shoulder. Looks like little Ace here is a sorehead. Vista laughed, patting Ace's head, who unsuccessfully tried to slap away his hand. Sabo sighed. He wasn't too happy with the delay also, but Ace was really starting to act immature. Not that he hadn't seen that before, but heck, there would probably only be a delay of a few days, a week at most. Deciding to use a secret weapon that only he and Ace knew so far and used against each other, he went over to the Raven and started to whisper something into his ear. If you don't get it together, I am going to tell Luffy how his oh-so-cool big brother acted immature. Ace's eyes narrowed at Sabo and he hissed, you wouldn't dare. Try me. Sabo smirked as he crossed his arms. The two brothers held a staring contest while the rest of the crew couldn't help but snigger at their exchange. Ah, you guys have to write down everything I miss happening, okay? Thatch asked Haruta, his eyes shining while the woman giggled lightly. Don't worry, I don't think you will miss out much, she answered, winking over at Izo, who chuckled. You guys are planning something? Thatch eyed them as the two just laughed and stayed quiet. Well, I don't want to destroy the mood or get rid of you. Marco started turning the attention to him. But you should get going now, Thatch, before your division sails off without you, yoy. Thatch's face fell as he stared at Marco. They would never do that. Smirking, Marco walked over to the railing and untied the rope that connected a large ship with the Moby. Let's see how long they wait, the blonde said, holding the rope in his hands, some crew members sniggering behind the blonde quietly. Why are you doing this every time? Thatch asked, shaking his head. Marco shrugged before threw the rope over the railing and held up his right hand. Your goodbyes take too long even if you only go for a few days. Can't be helped. Thatch laughed as he walked over to the railing. Well, I will be off now, he added as he high-fived Marco while leaping to stand on the railing of the other ship. Suddenly Ace ran up to the railing, leaning over it slightly. Don't you dare come back late, Thatch. Sabo appeared next to him. We want you to meet our little brother, don't forget that. Is that their way of saying have a safe trip? Thatch chuckled. I will be back soon, he waved back, grinning from ear to ear. For a moment it looked like he was losing his balance before he caught himself and jumped down from the railing onto the deck, turning his back to them. Soon he disappeared, talking to one of his division's members, and the two brothers also turned back to the deck of the Moby, only to find some of the crew members grinning at them. Do I have something on my face? Ace asked, irritated as he stared at them. So little Ace is not grumpy anymore? Vista asked, chuckling. Ace smirked and formed a fire in his hand. I am not little, nor was I ever grumpy. So or you were? Vista laughed as he dodged Ace's fire. Sabo watched amused how his brother started to chase after a few of their friends and chuckled before he let out a small sigh. He leaned with his back against the railing, his head turned so he could let his gaze wander over the horizon. Don't worry, you get to see him soon again. Marco walked up to the blonde, also leaning against the railing, but he watched the crew with amusement showing on his face. He is tougher than you think, yoy. Sabo side-eyed him before he turned back on watching the horizon. I know. I didn't mean Thatch, Marco stated, smiling. Sabo sighed once more. Guessed so. After all I heard about the kid, you don't need to worry so much. Marco looked up at the sky and watched some clouds. He has Garp as grandpa who wouldn't be tough after living with that man, yoy. Sabo chuckled, but Marco noticed that worry was still visible in his eyes. That's not really what you are worried about, is it? The top hat wearer shook his head as he gazed at the ocean. It's just, I don't know how to explain. Well then don't try to explain it. Marco answered, making the blonde look at him. Some things in this world don't need to be explained. Especially if you are a pirate, yoy. Sabo chuckled. I used to try to explain every little thing to Luffy and Ace. I should have known that sentence sooner. Would have spared you hours of explaining, yoy? Marco raised an eyebrow, watching how Sabo chuckled and nodded. It's no secret that both are idiots. Though I have to admit sometimes even Ace has his smart moments. The top head wearer watched how his brother jumped on Vista's back, tackling said man successfully down. I must say you handled the delay better than Ace. The Phoenix decided to finally say while watching how some crew members tricked Ace, who was too focused on Vista, and dumped a lot of water on the raven-haired. Better, Sabo laughed. Ace always was impatient. It's a wonder he didn't take off with the striker yet. Marco chuckled. It's only a few days. Just a little help signal from one of our turfs. It's not like someone is going to kidnap the kid before we get there. You're right, but Lou is our baby brother and we can't help but worry. Sabo laughed before he turned quiet. There was never a moment we forgot about him during our journey. Marco nodded in understanding. We will be there soon enough. It's pretty normal to think about the people you hold dear but are not anywhere near you. Just like you will worry about that the whole time now? Sabo grinned as he looked at the Phoenix Devil Fruit user. Marco shook his head, chuckled and punched Sabo lightly. Well, brothers worry about each other just like you said, kid. They both chuckled as a loud crash was heard, followed by a splash that caught the attention from the two blondes. They saw how a few crew members crowed around the railing opposite to them and walked over. What happened? Sabo curiously asked Haruta, who giggled nonstop. Ace and Vista went overboard. Haruta paused her giggles, turning to light laughers. And why is that so funny? Marco asked, already having a slight idea what could have happened. Namur got annoyed and he grabbed their necks and threw, yelling something about them needing to cool down. Izo added as he chuckled. Marco pinched the bridge between his eyes as he sighed, while Sabo just laughed, all the while hearing yelling coming from the sea below them. Luffy walked through the hallways, happily munching on a piece of meat he snatched as extra from the kitchen as his eyes landed on the notice board, or more on the new bounty posters on it. His eyes quickly searched for two particular faces, but then he was sidetracked by other posters. Sawtooth Arlong, of 100 Plans Kuro. Slowly Luffy looked at each poster, noticing that some of them were crossed out, until he reached one in particular. Devil Child Nico Robin. Luffy stared at the wanted poster of a child that was even younger than him. He didn't know what it was, but something in his mind screamed at him, telling him that this is a lonely, just like he was before he met his brothers. His eyes focused on the name again. Bogart, finally finding the boy, walked up to him and noticed how he stared at that poster. For a moment the Marine worried about what was going on in the boy's head before he saw him turning to him and pointing at a crossed out poster. Nay, why is that poster of that Kuro dude crossed out? Bogart's eyes shifted shortly to look at who he meant before he turned back to the pre-teen. That means that someone took already care of that person. Why is it still hanging here then? And why isn't that one crossed out? Luffy asked, pointing at Robin's poster. Because the bounties still exist on these people no matter what, and hers is not crossed out because she is still to be found. Bogart answered, a little irritated. Luffy made a thoughtful expression for a moment before he walked over, asking a passing by Marine for a marker. Once he got one, Bogart watched how the boy walked over to the poster and draw a huge cross on it. There, now it's taken care of. Bogart stared at the boy while Luffy grinned from ear to ear, seemingly proud of himself. It is not, Bogart simply stated while Luffy pouted. It is. I will take care of her, and her new bounty won't have that ugly nickname, Devil Child. The raven-haired boy argued back stubbornly, implying his plans for his future pirate crew. Bogart suppressed the need to sigh and just pointed down the hallway. You should go back to your training. She. Okay, Luffy grinned, thinking he won the argument. Vice Admiral Garp won't be happy hearing about this. Bogart muttered, his scowl deepening as he pulled his head down. Damn these ungrateful kids. Garp yelled, slamming his fist down. On his desk were two wanted posters laid out. Why was their bounty raised? Would you calm down? An older woman asked calmly. I am not here to listen to your yelling. Oh right, Garp said, suddenly realizing what he did. Why are you here anyway? Sure you are not only bringing over the newest bounty posters? The woman smiled as she folded her hands, leaning back in her chair. Well, I wanted to see if some rumors are true or not. Teely. And what rumors would that be? That you are trying to force a child into becoming a marine against his will, and that said child is responsible for the damage to your base. The older woman kept smiling as she watched Garp's face fall. And I want to know where this child is now. Garp eyes narrowed. This is none of you concern. Garp. I may be old, but I am not senile. I know more than you think, old friend. The woman answered and smiled mysteriously as she leaned forward. This child may be in danger. I suspect that Sakazuki has planned something behind our backs. What would that be? Garp urged as he stared at the old woman in disbelief. That is what I want to figure out. Marine, never. Chapter 11. Whitebeard watched how his children joked around and had fun on deck. With amused smiles he observed how Haruta played a game Sabo told them about, called Connect the Dots, which their little brother invented when he was bored once. The pirate captain, recognizing that she tried to draw their pirate flag while connecting Ace Freckles. Others around them stifled their laughter as good as possible, trying not to wake the sleeping 2nd Division commander. The old man's gaze wandered over the deck till he spotted Marco. The Phoenix was currently getting frustrated by the stacks of papers he decided to do on deck to enjoy the sun a little instead of sitting in his room under deck. Whitebeard chuckled lightly. The blonde was always one of the most responsible ones of his children. He suspected that the absence of one of his children was more the cause for the blonde's frustration than the paperwork. His eyes then landed on a group who were playing cards. Izo being in the lead, seeing how most of the rest who were playing cards had to take of their clothing as punishment while Izo sat there perfectly dressed. Whitebeard's eyes sparkled in amusement when he saw Vista throwing his card downs, yelling something about that this was the last time he would play when Izo played. The pirate captain took a sip of his sake bottle as he let his eyes wander over the deck once more. But then he frowned, seeing one particular child leaned against the railing, his face turned to the ocean. The old man had seen the child doing this a lot lately and had always wondered what this was about. 2 days ago when Thatch left, Whitebeard had asked Marco about it since he had seen him talking to the top hat wearer. But Marco had told him that even Sabo couldn't really explain it himself. It worried Whitebeard. The pirate captain kept watching the blonde teen until he finally made eye contact with him. With a smile he motioned for the young one to come over to him, to which the boy obeyed, a questioning look on his face. What is it, Oyaji? Sabo asked, standing before Whitebeard. The man only chuckled, telling him to sit down next to him. Sabo did as told, watching together with Whitebeard the rest of the crew in peace. You are staring out at the sea awfully often lately, Whitebeard said after a while, his eyes not once turning to Sabo but always watching the rest of his children. I do? Sabo scratched his head. Guess I never noticed. Whitebeard looked shortly down at the young one before his eyes returned to the card game Vista started to play with Jozu this time. Want to try to explain now what's on your mind? Sabo looked a little shocked up at the old man before he looked down at the wooden floor. Should have guessed Marco said something. Your worry is everyone's worry, Whitebeard answered simply. It was quiet for a long time between them. They watched how Ace woke up, wondering why everyone around him was laughing, before he noticed the marker in Haruta's hand and run of underdeck, coming back up seconds later chasing after her. Whitebeard was slowly giving up hope to get Sabo to talk about his worries. It may have been too soon to ask, but then said boy let out a long sigh. It's just, I have a bad feeling, like something bad is happening to someone close to me. Whitebeard nodded and took a sip of his sake. Is it that you are worried about? Or the little brother of yours? No, I am not worried about anyone in particular. Sabo shook his head. It's hard to put in words. It's like a dull thump in your chest, telling you something is wrong while your mind clearly sees that everything is alright and there is nothing to worry about, but you still can't shake off the feeling like something is going to happen or is happening. Whitebeard stated, his eyes focused on Ace as he missed Haruta, who jumped out of the way, causing him to crash into Vista, giving Jozu the chance to see Vista's cards. Sabo thought about it before he nodded. Kinda like that. Say, child, have you ever heard about people having a sixth sense for something? Or have abilities that do not come from devil fruits? Whitebeard asked, chuckling lightly, seeing how Vista started yelling after Ace for causing him to lose another card game. I have read about it and I believe that our little brother has won when it comes to people or people's intentions, he meet, being good or bad. Sabo answered, also trying not to laugh how a half-naked Vista was now chasing after Ace. Have you ever thought of you having one too? The pirate captain asked his, chuckling, turning to light laughter, seeing how Haruta and Ace took a sharp turn, causing Vista to crash into Marco, making his papers fly all over the place. Some were carried away by the wind and Marco stared at the papers blankly. Not really. Why should I? Sabo countered, shaking his head slightly as he stood up. It's probably nothing after all, Oyaji. There is nothing for me to worry about right now. That's probably because you never once had the need to notice it before, Whitebeard mumbled quietly and watched how Sabo left his side, running over to Ace, Haruta and Vista, trying to help them, escaping Marco's fury, which more or less ended with them all being cornered by the Phoenix and forced to clean the deck while the rest of the crew laughed. Whitebeard took another sip of his sake bottle. He took one last glance at the young blonde, seeing him hitting Ace upside the head and complaining about why he suddenly was included in their punishment. The old pirate captain wasn't too sure what he should make out of the boy's words. Out of experience he knew that the child's feeling was probably right, but Whitebeard didn't know in which way it was right. Was something going to happen to one of his children? Was something going to happen to the boy they planned to visit in the East Blue once Thatch returned safely to the Mobi? Or was something already happening to one of them? Whitebeard's thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of a den mushi in his pocket. Slowly he pulled it out, grinning wide as he noticed which one rang. I hoped you would call sometime. Whitebeard laughed, making sure his children didn't notice he was talking to someone over a den mushi. Usual place in around a week. A voice asked, or more like demanded, on the other line, causing Whitebeard to chuckle. No greeting? Well, I can guess why you want to meet up. The pirate captain chuckled. I will be there, but let's meet on the island we use in paradise. What? You are not in the new world. Not right now, we were on our way of a little trip when we got a help signal from one of my turfs here. Bwahahahaha, fine. I will be there, the voice answered before it hung up, and Whitebeard was grinning happily. Marco walked over to him, being one of the only ones that noticed Whitebeard's talk. So, the delay to the East Blue trip will be longer now, yo? Whitebeard only chuckled. The boys won't be all too happy. Marco shook his head. I got a job for them to do then. That way we also avoid having them meet anywhere near the Mobi, yo. I will leave it to you, Marco. The pirate captain answered, taking a huge gulp of his drink while Marco let out a small sigh but still smiled as he crossed his arms. Brat! Zephyr yelled as Luffy was brutally slammed against the ground, leaving a huge crater. Dust was everywhere and Zephyr had trouble making out Luffy and Lucci in it. Luffy heard the Marines yell, but he was focused on the man holding him down. His eyes hazily searched for a way to get out of his grip, and in an attempt to free himself, Luffy did the first thing that came to his mind. He bit Lucci's hand. Catching the agent by surprise, Luffy successfully freed himself and scrambled out of reach. The raven-haired boy noticed the iron taste in his mouth, and as he wiped it he noticed the blood, causing him to glare at Lucci, who calmly stood up inspecting his hand. Bastard. I admit that caught me by surprise, Lucci said, emotionless. But you won't be that lucky again. Luffy blinked as of his sight. Sensing an attack from behind, the rubber boy leapt out of the way, barely dodging the agent's attack. So you start sensing it? Luffy growled. What are you trying to pull? Nothing. Lucci answered as he disappeared again. Luffy, being quick to sense it again, leapt out of the way in time. In midair the boy turned around and clapped his feet together. Gomu Gomu no spear. Lucci once again disappeared from Luffy's sight, causing the rubber boy to curse heavily as he tried to sense where the agent had disappeared to. Sensing me won't bring you anything if you are not fast enough to react. Shocked Luffy stared at the face of Lucci as he appeared right before him, slamming his fist in Luffy's stomach, sending the boy flying against the next wall. That promptly collapsed onto the rubber boy. Lucci stood there waiting for the boy to stand up again. He knew that this was not yet enough to kill the boy. The agent's eyes flickered over to Zephyr, and he noted that the man seemed like he was about to stop their fight any moment. The agent knew that he would have to act quickly. The time limit of his mission was almost over. He only had 2 days left. Until now Zephyr had stopped him every time he attempted to fulfill his mission. Lucci never once failed any of his missions and he was not going to start with that now. Hearing the rumbling of rocks, Lucci turned his attention back to Luffy, who stood up in the middle of the rock pile. The rubber boy was breathing heavily and bleeding from some wounds. Luffy looked up. Determination was written all over his face. Slowly the rubber boy walked over to his hat that lay on the ground. Never once did he take his eyes off Lucci. He reached out for his head and dusted it off before placing it on his head. "I am not finished yet." Zephyr, who was about to say something, stopped himself. He smirked a little at the boy's determination and decided now to watch the fight a little longer before he would stop it. Ace slumped down against the railing, groaning tiredly as he glanced at his brother sitting next to him. Did Marco really have to make us clean the whole deck? Sabo chuckled as he leaned against the railing. Well, you guys did mess up all the paperwork he had done. Then he shouldn't do that kind of stuff on deck, Vista answered as he slumped down next to Ace. He is just frustrated that we didn't hear from Thatch yet. Haruta added, sitting on a box that wasn't too far from them. Thatch is only gone for 2 days now. Can't he let out his frustration on him once he returns instead of us? Ace muttered, resting his head on his knees as he felt like he would fall asleep any minute now. Ha ha ha. You should have seen Marco when Haruta was off on a mission for a week. He made us all work on the ship nearly 24/7 the first 3 days, making us all avoid him for the rest of the week. Vista chuckled lightly. He did? Haruta asked, surprised. And I thought he was bad when he so forgot to tell us that he was going to shop for new clothing for the crew and disappeared for 3 days. Well, the scowling Marco gave him taught us all to never forget to take at least one den mushi with us when we leave the ship, or a baby den if we are still in the area. Vista added, scratching his head. Ace and Sabo only looked at each other and then back at them. You guys are kidding, right? Haruta laughed. Nope. It was a 2 hours lecture about why it's important to keep one with us. Does Marco have some kind of worry issue? Sabo asked, slightly irritated and surprised. Not really. It's just his way of getting back at us for being careless most of the time. Vista shrugged and patted Ace on the shoulder. Wait till your first long leave official mission as division commander and you will see what we mean. I am not looking forward to it then. Ace muttered tiredly while Sabo chuckled. Knowing how careless his brother can be, he was kind of looking forward on seeing him getting for once scowled by someone else than him. Now, how about a card game? Vista asked, pulling out a set of cards from nowhere, lifting the mood up. Haruta jumped down from the boxes to sit across him. Loser either gets drawn on or has to take off clothing. Time for payback. Ace joined in, glaring at Haruta a little. Sabo sighed before he also joined in. Don't complain later on. Ace. Sabo. Marco's voice came from across the deck and both teens groaned. Maybe next time you two, Vista smiled as he watched the two walking over to Marco, who stood there waiting for them. What is it, Killjoy? Marco's eye twitched at Ace's nickname, but he ignored it as he held out an eternal pose to them. An eternal pose? Sabo asked as he took it and looked at it closer. He noticed that it was completely blank. Nothing on it hinted in the slightest way to which island it was pointing. What is it pointing at? Ace asked, also looking at it confused. To an island we are taking a spontaneous stop at. Marco answered, crossing his arms. I need you two to bring that to Thatch with a message, Yoi. Sabo raised a brow, looking questionable back at Marco. Why? It takes us around 4 days to reach the island from where we are right now. Thatch doesn't know we are heading there, so I need you to bring it too and tell him to be there in around 7 to 8 days from now once he finished his mission. You both should take the striker for that little trip, Yoi, Marco simply said. And what are we supposed to do once we brought it to Thatch? Ace questioned. As far as I get it, the Moby won't be here then, and since Thatch would have the eternal pose. Marco smiled at the two as he placed his hands on each of their shoulders. You two are going to join Thatch on his mission and make sure he doesn't screw up, Yoi. The two brothers stared wordlessly at Marco. Sabo then leaned over to Ace. Marco does realize that the striker is a one-man boat, right? I guess not. Or he wouldn't suggest it, Ace mumbled back. I am right here, Yoi. Marco stated, annoyed, causing the two to stare fearful back at him. The striker maybe is small, but you two will still fit in it, somehow. Now go pack and get going, Yoi. Yay. Ace said as he and Sabo left after getting shooed away by the 1st Division commander. On their way back, Sabo suddenly stopped and stared out into the sea. His eyes wandered along the horizon as he felt an unsettling feeling in his chest. Ace noticed that the blonde stopped and turned to his brother and saw how worry crossed Sabo's face shortly. "Sabo," Ace called out to him, catching the blonde's attention. "Is something wrong?" The blonde faced him and shook his head. "No, it's nothing." "Okay," Ace answered, unsure. He wanted to question his brother more, but instead he turned to continue his way to the quarters, making sure to wait for the blonde to follow him. Sabo once more shortly glanced at the sea before he let out a small sigh and followed his raven-haired brother. "It's nothing," the blonde mumbled to himself, once more unnoticed by the raven-haired. Luffy slammed his fists together, glaring at Lucci. That was when the agent noticed that the boy's arms turned black. Lucci was stunned for a moment, but in the end figured out that the boy's use of haki wouldn't change anything in the end, since he probably didn't have much control over it. Running toward Lucci, Luffy drew back his right fist and punched the agent's face, who didn't bother to dodge. That turned out to be a mistake on Lucci's side, seeing how he was suddenly thrown back by the punch. Grinning, Luffy stood there pointing with one fist at Lucci. "Won't be so lucky again, huh?" Lucci was the one who glared this time. "Don't get too full of yourself, boy." "Don't underestimate me," Luffy countered, still grinning. Without any more words, both charged at each other, engaging into a fist fight as both didn't bother to use any special attacks. Zephyr watched, slightly surprised how Luffy managed to keep up pretty well with Lucci. The Marine was also pleased to see Luffy using his Busashuku haki, giving the boy a buchi. Still, the Marine noticed how Lucci landed more and more hits on the boy. What irritated the Marine more was that slowly more and more cuts appeared on Luffy's body. They were in a fist fight, so how was Luffy slowly getting covered in cuts? The answer was simple, as Zephyr observed Lucci's way of fighting more. The agent was apparently using a special technique, causing with air pressure small cuts on the younger boy's body. Zephyr knew that if the fight would go on longer, things would get very ugly. Luffy did not have the stamina to withstand this kind of exhaustion yet. Jumping away from each other, Luffy panted heavily, his eyes heaving, trouble to focus on Lucci. His vision was starting to blur and even faded out every now and then. His arms lost their black color, signaling that Luffy lost his haki control. "Damn it." Lucci smirked. He had to admit the boy was showing great willpower, but that wouldn't be enough to get defeated by him yet. The agent thought that it was a shame that he wouldn't get to fight the boy once more against the boy when his mission was over. Taking deep breaths, Luffy tried to regain as much strength as possible, not once taking his eyes off Lucci. Sadly, the rubber boy's eyes weren't able to keep up with the agent's speed anymore. So even when he was sensing the man's attack, he was not able to dodge fast enough. Slamming with his back against a wall, Luffy cried out in pain. Even though all the pain he felt in his body made him start to feel numb, the rubber boy was not willed to give up yet. Slowly he dragged himself up on his feet again, panting heavily and struggling to regain his normal breathing. "Not yet." Lucci eyed the boy before him, knowing that the fight would be over soon. The agent glanced at Zephyr, taking note that the Marine seemed to see that it was pointless trying to stop the fight with the boy's will to keep fighting. "I am," the CP9 agent looked back at the raven-haired boy. "I am not done yet." The rubber boy took a deep breath, his arms turned black once more, and Lucci for once was slightly impressed by Luffy's determination. Taking another deep breath, Luffy stared at Lucci. Both were waiting for the other to make the first move. Suddenly Luffy let out a war cry as he ran at Lucci, his fist slamming into the agent's body, who suddenly found himself struggling to dodge the attacks. One after another, Luffy managed to land blows on Lucci, his speed seemingly increasing with every punch he landed. Gomu Gomu no Gatling. Sliding to a halt, Lucci managed to block blows against his face with his arms. A little irritated, the agent stared back at the panting boy, who grinned slightly in victory. But Luffy's smile fell as he noticed that way Lucci stared at him. The agent's eyes clearly held the killing intent hidden in his eyes. "It was nice fighting against you," the agent said calmly, causing Luffy to stare wide-eyed at him. "But I am afraid it will end here." Zephyr watched in shock how Lucci suddenly turned into his hybrid form, slamming the boy faster than Zephyr could react against a wall at the far end of the training grounds. His clawed hand drew back, ready to strike the boy's chest. "That's enough." Zephyr yelled out loudly, trying to get to them in time, his eyes solemnly focused on the two. Jijining. Luffy struggled to say something. His eyes were wide as they mirrored the claw ready to tear open his chest. Be bastard. Stoop. Zephyr yelled loudly as he watched the claw nearing Luffy's chest. Until a gust of wind raised dust around the two, blocking his view. Marine? Never. Chapter 12. Stoop. Zephyr yelled loudly as he watched the claw nearing Luffy's chest until a gust of wind raised dust around the two, blocking his view. Perplexed, Zephyr kept running, but all he could make out in the dust were shadows. A familiar feeling of fear rushed through the older Marine's mind and he stopped shortly before the dust. Slowly the air cleared and Zephyr could make out that the shadows were people, 5 people to be exact. Zephyr needed one more moment to register what was happening before him. A muscled man with white hair styled so that it was pointing up, held onto Lucci's hand that had been aiming at Luffy's chest. Rob Lucci was only staring at the hand, emotionless. No longer was the agent in his hybrid form. Zephyr recognized the man. It was Kong, the world government's commander-in-chief. Garp was standing right in front of Lucci, blocking Zephyr's view of Luffy, who was behind the vice admiral, supported by Suru. If looks could kill, Zephyr was sure that Lucci would be death all along with the icy stare Garp was giving the agent. Suru was supporting Luffy and slowly lowered the exhaust boy down to the ground and placed him so that his back was leaning against the wall behind him. She carefully examined the rubber boy's wounds and gave a warning look in Lucci's direction. I believe you fulfilled your purpose in this training, Kong said sternly, not once taking his eyes off the agent. His tone was cold and filled with authority. Suddenly Garp's hands rushed forward, grabbing Lucci by his collar and lifting him up. What the hell were you doing? Were you trying to kill him? WHO gave you orders? Vice Admiral Garp, I believe this is enough now, Kuzan calmly said as he walked over to them with Zephyr. Suru placed her hand on his arm, nodding with her head in Luffy's direction, who still sat on the ground. Let him go. The boy needs you more now. Glancing at her, Garp let unwillingly go of Lucci and turned to pick up Luffy from the ground. He gave one more time an icy glare in Lucy's direction before he walked away. Zephyr, Kuzan, Suru and Kong stayed back watching Lucci, how he glanced at the boy and back at them. No emotions were visible on his face. Kong crossed his arms as he approached Lucci. I believe a talk is needed. If you allow, I would like to be part. Suru added as she stepped up next to him. I would like to understand more what is going on. Since this all is happening in my base, I would like to be present as well and know who is responsible, Kuzan mentioned as he looked at Kong. Of course, I will also provide a room for this talk. The commander-in-chief nodded, motioning for Kuzan to lead the way and for the rest to follow suit, all the while not once letting Lucci out of his eyesight. Said agent eyed each of them, emotionless. What was he now supposed to do? Spandam had not given him any specific orders if this would happen. He glanced once more at Kong, knowing full well that the orders of this man stood in the ranking higher than any orders Spandam could give, but then there was also his other undercover mission that was more important than this. Yes, he couldn't risk his other mission. Now Lucci knew what answers he would give them. The entry time the three talked, Zephyr had kept quiet and took a look around the training field. Something didn't add up. He remembered the gust of wind, but from where had it come? He looked around the field, inspecting the damage Luffy and Lucci left behind. He knew Kong and the two vice admirals were powerful, but that wind was not caused by them. Zephyr was sure of that. The marine instructor took another look around until he noticed a passed-out marine behind a wall. He kept on walking and noticed more passed-out marines. After a while of looking around and checking if these marines were already, Zephyr turned to walk to the infirmary. Deep in thoughts about what happened. Could it be? Does the boy possess Haoshoku Haki? 4 days later, so, we can't prove he was behind it? Garp asked, irritated as he leaned back in his chair. Suru sat across from him, her hands folded as she rested her chin on them. Kong, Aokiji and I questioned Rob Lucci, but the boy did not give any useful information, the old woman said as she thought more about it. We are bringing him back to Enos lobby. There, Kong and I will also question Spandam since Rob Lucci is one of his agents, but if this also proves to be fruitless. Both vice admirals stared at nothing in particular as they were deep in thoughts, until Suru spoke up again. How is the boy doing? Garp shook his head. He refuses to speak with anyone right now. I see, Suru answered before she stood up, leaving the room. But by the door she stopped and looked back at Garp. You're heading for Nervaria in paradise, right? Not directly. Garp answered curtly, his eyes glancing shortly at two bounty posters. Suru smiled mysteriously. Greet your friend from me and tell him to stop buying all the sake in my areas. We need some too. Garp gaped at her for a moment before he laughed. Suru smiled a last time at him before she left the room and headed for her own ship that sailed smoothly next to Garp's. Once she was back on it, she sailed off in a different direction. Luffy watched from his bullseye window how Suru's ship disappeared in the distance. The rubber boy lay back down on his bed and stared at the wooden ceiling. A grim look was on his face as he looked at the bandages around his arms and body. Next time, I will beat him. What the ace? Thatch screamed as he stared at the teen before him who appeared out of a fire pillar on the deck of his ship. I am here too, Sabo answered, wringing out as much water as he could from his coat, giving Ace a little glare. Don't look at me. They fired at us. Ace defended himself, pointing at the pirate Thatch was about to stab with his sword. Doesn't mean you can suddenly jump of the striker and push me into the water, Sabo retorted, still glaring at Ace. Ignoring the stares the two were getting from both friends and enemies. If I didn't jump it would have hit both of us, Ace countered, crossing his chest. Ace, you are made of fire. You could have easily blocked the cannonball or let it explode before it came near us. Sabo answered, the glare still present. The enemy pirates by now had recovered from their shock and slowly moved closer to the brothers. Oh, I forgot. Ups. Ace answered, scratching his head, ignoring how three pirates slowly moved closer to him from behind. USP? That's all you say to that? Sabo face palmed, before he casually reached for the pipe on his back and smacked two pirates behind him with it. Oh come on Sabo. It's just water, Ace said, irritated as he kicked the three pirates behind him away, not even caring that he sent at least one of them overboard. Just water, I am soaking wet, the top hat wearer complained, ramming the end of his pipe in the stomach of another enemy. Boys? Thatch asked, confused, slicing two enemies down. Why are you even here? Oh, Marco sent us. Ace answered, casually punching a random pirate in the face and kicking another overboard again. He wanted us to deliver a message and an eternal pose to you, Sabo added, rotating his pipe and successfully knocking out several pirates. Seriously? The cook muttered, kicking an enemy pirate away before he scratched his head. Yup. The brother chorused as they both kicked the same pirate in the stomach at the same time. Stop having a casual talk while we are fighting, a random pirate of the enemy's ship shouted before he was punched in the face by a member of Thatch division while the three stared blankly in his direction. Why haven't you finished them off yet, Thatch? They are weaklings, Ace asked, slightly irritated. Well, there are a great number of them and we can't fire the cannons or we could hit the town behind their ship. They're too close to it. Thatch shrugged as he kicked another enemy over the railing. Besides, it's a goo. Thatch stopped what the two brothers were doing. Sabo was standing next to Ace, who had his right arm on fire. The blonde was pointing at the enemy ship and apparently explaining something to Ace, who nodded. Were you two listening to me? Thatch yelled, irritated as he walked over to the two. We were. Sabo answered, not once looking at him. Where was I? Oh yay. So if you aim for the bottom of their ship you can go full power, but there is a slight chance that their ship won't sink. If you aim for the middle, do not put too much strength in it or your shot will go right through it and hit the down too. I shouldn't aim for the top part or I will hit the town for sure, right? Ace asked, and Sabo confirmed with a nod. Thatch looked to and fro between the two. What are you two planning? The cook was a little worried, but the two just smiled at him. We are sinking their ship. Thatch sighed and waved with one hand, deciding to leave it to the two, and turned back on slicing and kicking the enemies on his division's ship. Ace meanwhile was positioning himself. He drew back his right fist and focused once more on the target before his fist rushed forward and a hot blazing fire rushed in the direction of the enemy ship. Heiken. That was too much, Ace. Sabo suddenly shouted as he leaned over the railing, watching how the fire went right through the ship, rushing only inches above the water in the direction of the town. Relax, it will die down before. Ace cut himself off as he watched in shock how 3 houses were set on fire and burned down. Ups. Thatch, Sabo and the rest of the 4th Division stared at Ace in disbelief before they groaned, knowing that they will be made responsible and would have to repair what Ace had done. The only good effect that it had was that the rest of the enemies decided to flee after that display of fire. When Marco asks what happened, "Let's just blame Ace, he can do all the paperwork," Thatch whispered over to Sabo, who sighed and quietly nodded. Really, the two were so not looking forward on seeing Marco again. Luffy stood on deck staring at the huge ship that was next to his grandfather's marine ship, his previous mood completely forgotten. His eyes sparkled as he felt the need to explore this ship. He glanced over to his grandfather, who was talking with a few of his men, and then over at Bogart, who was seemingly not paying attention right now, seeing how his face was hidden behind a newspaper. So the rubber boy rotated his arm, ready to stretch it over to the huge ship and hold onto its railing, before he felt the aura of a certain vice admiral right behind him, causing the straw-hatted boy to pale and slowly turn around. JG-chan. Garp knocked his fist against Luffy's head, causing the boy to cry out in pain. Some Marines even winced seeing it. A grin was then on Garp's face, but the aura around him told that the man was still very serious. "You are not allowed to leave this ship, Luffy. Don't you even dare to enter the ship over there, and don't cause any trouble." Luffy gulped, nodding very fast. Garp, satisfied with the boy's answer, turned over to Bogart. "Make sure the boy does what I said." Bogart put his newspaper away and nodded curtly, watching how Garp left the boat and walked deeper into the island alone. The Marine turned over to see how Luffy was doing, only to find the boy missing, already having a feeling where the boy went to as he looked over to the huge ship. Slowly Luffy sneaked around the ship, his eyes sparkling at how huge it was. He never before had seen such a huge ship. Sure, some of the Marine battleships were also huge, but not as huge as this one. Excited Luffy walked through the first door he found and explored more, not once noticing that he was passing some of the people who gave him a curious yet confused look. But Luffy ignored them as he kept on walking through the ship, until he bumped into someone and papers flew around them to the ground. Luffy mumbled an apology as he placed his straw hat back on his head, and he looked up at a blonde that glared at him darkly. Both stared at each other for a long while before Luffy tilted his head confused to the side. "Who are you?" "That's what I am supposed to ask you." The blonde countered back, very irritated of how a 14 years old or younger was wandering around on their ship. Oh, I am Mon." The blonde cut the rubber boy off before he could finish. "Listen, Mon, or whatever your name is, I don't really care. Just answer me. Why are you on this ship, and what are you doing here, yo?" The blonde eyed the boy before he started to collect the papers that lay everywhere. Luffy was about to answer as he was interrupted yet again by a new person walking up to them. The man was a little huge and had black hair. A black bandana was tied around his head. He wore a white shirt with black trousers, a yellow slash holding them up, and black boots. The man was carrying around a cherry pie with him and missing some teeth. "Commander Marco, that Marine dude from Garp wants to talk about you, about some boy Probab." "Oh, you found the boy already, zahahahahahahaha." Luffy looked at the blonde named Marco and back at the black-haired. He suddenly felt very uncomfortable and unconsciously took a step back. "So that brat is with Garp, yo?" "Looks like it." The black-haired shrugged before he grinned and waved over to Luffy, who still watched them quietly. "Yo. That Marine dude, bogus something is looking for you." Luffy didn't answer. He quietly watched the black-haired man, who seemed to be confused about the boy not answering. Patting Marco on the shoulder, the black-haired decided to leave again. "Cha, I will leave the kid to you then, Commander. See y'all later." "Teach, I got enough." "Oh, never mind." Marco answered, irritated as he stared at the papers in his hands and then back at Luffy. He noticed how the Luffy's shoulders were stiff but relaxed once Teach was out of sight. The blonde was curious of why the boy was reacting like that. "Look, let me bring these back to my room and then I will show you the way back to the deck." "Okay, yoy," Marco asked, not really waiting for an answer as he already started walking. "Nay, Pineapple Sand, this is a pirate ship, right?" Marco's eye twitched as he turned sharply around and glared at the rubber boy. "My name is Marco. Not Pineapple." Luffy completely ignored that as he looked around amazed in the ship, causing Marco's eye to twitch. The blonde let out a sigh before he decided to answer the kid's question. "And yes, this is a pirate ship. To be exact, the main ship of the Whitebeard pirates, the Moby, yoy." Luffy's eyes sparkled happily as he jumped up and down. A real pirate ship. Marco looked at the boy irritated. Why are you so excited, Yoi? I am on a real pirate ship. That's why. Luffy nearly shouted happily as he ran before Marco, looking and touching nearly everything he saw, causing the blonde's irritation to grow. Let's just get you back to Bogart, Yoi. Marco sighed after he placed the papers back on his desk and had to drag out Luffy of his room before the boy could destroy something. As soon as the two reached the deck, Luffy ran over to Bogart, happily talking about how excited he was to be on a real pirate ship. Irritated Marco watched the two, still wondering why the heck a 14 or younger years old boy was traveling with Marines. So that's the newbie that destroyed Garp's base? Haruta asked curiously as she walked up next to Marco. Can't be. They don't hire kids younger than 17 to be regular Marines. Vista spoke out as he joined the three. I don't really care. Marco answered, still irritated. All I want to know is why this kid is on our ship now and why you two are not cleaning up your cabins like I told you to do, Yoi. Haruta and Vista both took a step back, laughing awkwardly before Haruta suddenly pointed at something. Oh look, it's Tej. Marco started at them, irritated, and crossed his arms, causing the two to start sweating. I am not falling for that, Yoi. The two looked at each other silently, asking each other how's firing line now, as suddenly something, or rather someone, caught their attention. Luffy, who had talked loudly about how amazing he found the ship, had suddenly quieted down and slowly inched closer to Bogart. The rubber boy's eyes were fixed on one person who had entered the deck and sat down by the railing eating cherry pies. Bogart side-eyed Luffy. He didn't understand the sudden change in the boy's behavior, and so did some of the white-beard pirates around them, including Marco, Haruta, and Vista. Don't you think that's strange? Haruta questioned as she watched the boy closer, wondering what was going on. Vista only nodded, also watching the boy with interest. Marco sighed and placed his hands on their shoulder, turning the two and pushing them in the direction to the door that leads underdeck. Go back and do what I told you guys. Grumbling, the two did so, not wanting to face a worse punishment from the irritated Fist Division commander. The blonde on the other side turned back to the Marine and the boy, who were going back to the Marine ship next to the Moby. The blonde glanced over at Teach, then back at the boy, who was still focused on the black-haired pirate. Marco would lie if he said he wasn't curious of the sudden change of behavior. He sure was interested what caused it. After all, Teach wasn't dangerous, nor was he admitting a dangerous aura. So why was the boy suddenly so focused on him? More importantly, why hadn't he heard of Thatch, Ace, and Sabo yet? Don't they know how to use a Den Den Mushi? Marco was sure that he would have to repeat his lecture to the three once they were safely back on the Moby. Thatch, Ace, and Sabo shivered at the same time as they looked up from searching thought the shipwreck. Thatch was the first to speak. Did you feel that? I think Marco just thought of a new way to punish us, Ace muttered as he turned back to the pile of wood before him. Why are we even searching through this shipwreck? You would rather help the others rebuild what you burned down, Sabo shot back as he looked through some slightly burned books he found. Accidentally burned. I didn't do that on purpose, the Raven defended himself as he glared lightly over to the blonde. Burned is burned, Sabo stated matter-of-factly, throwing the book he had just looked through over his shoulder. Now you two, you are both responsible for that, Thatch added sheepishly as he searched through a huge wooden chest. By the way, why did the two of you arrive only now? It had been 6 days since I left the Moby. Well, Mr. Navigator here pointed me at the wrong direction, Ace muttered, kicking off a few pieces of wood to the side and taking a look at something that looked a little like a map. Well, I did give you the right directions, but you decided to strike down a sea king, getting us off course, Sabo responded, reading though another book he found before also dismissing it. You were hungry too. I couldn't let it escape, the fire user defended himself as he stuffed the map he found in his bag and looked for more useful things. Oh, please, we could have gone for, Sabo was suddenly interrupted. Oh my god. Guess what I just found? Thatch yelled loudly, holding up a small wooden box. A portal to another world. Sabo and Thatch looked at Ace as if he had grown a second. The Raven stared back at them and shrugged, scratching his head. What? Thatch said guess. The two shared a look before Thatch grinned again, holding the wooden box to the two brothers so that could look into it. Anyway, look at what I found. That's Sabo started. Devil fruit, Ace finished. I don't recommend eating them. Yep. I wonder what I should do with it. Selling or eating, but first of all, Thatch looked at the fruit he had found once more before closing the box. I should find out what kind of powers it holds. Marine? Never. Chapter 13, Sabo? Ace asked as he slowly walked up to his brother. They had searched through the entry shipwreck for useful stuff. Thought all they found besides Thatch's devil fruit were a few logbooks, some weird liquid, maps, burned books and more maps. You could have thought there was at least some stuff that would be worth a lot of money, seeing how it was a pirate ship. Finally they returned to the town helping out the rest of the 4th Division rebuilding the houses. Along the way Sabo had disappeared at some point, saying that he wanted to find out what that liquid was. The fire user had then gone to look around till he found his blonde brother sitting on the ground with his pipe in his hand and the liquid next to him that he was painting on his pipe. Yo Ace. The blonde answered shortly as he looked over his shoulder grinning. What are you doing? The raven-haired asked as he plopped down next to Sabo and was about to touch the weird liquid until Sabo slapped his hand away from it. Don't touch that, you will regret doing that. The blonde commented, turning back on coating his pipe in it. What are you doing then? An irritated stare landed on Sabo, who didn't really care about that but was focused on his work. Ace let out a sigh. What's so special about that stuff that you had to put it on your pipe? Well, I analyzed it a little and I noticed that it has an unquiet color that reminds one of the sea. Sabo explained while Ace was still giving him a blank look. Do you remember what the old geezer once told us about how he can travel from the Grand Line to the East Blue even with the Red Line in the way? Ace thought about it for a while until he fell back, letting his back rest against the soft grass. Something about sea stone placed on the underside of his ship or so. Sabo nodded. I always wondered how that was possible. Well, this liquid is the answer. I don't know how these pirates got their hands on that, but thanks to that we found it. Why? Ace questioned as he used his elbows to support his upper body, getting a better look at Sabo. Because this is sea stone coating. Sabo answered, holding up his pipe now and inspecting his work, not noticing how Ace fell back on the ground wide-eyed before he collected himself and sat up. Sea stone coating? Damn, never thought stuff like that existed. The raven reached out, placing his finger carefully on Sabo's staff, instantly feeling the effect of the coating, and withdraws it again. That's the real deal for sure. But why are you using it? Well, I figured it will take longer till I master the hockey the others are teaching us. So till then I will use this against logia devil fruit users. The blonde declared proudly while receiving a skeptic look from his brother. Why do I not believe you? You're better at mastering it than me. And I have awaked my hockey long before you. Ace sprung up, pointing an accusing finger at his blonde brother, who was now smiling slyly at him. Well, yay, but coding a weapon in hockey is still hard. The blonde now stood up too. And it's kinda hard trying to remind you of your manners if you are able to dodge blows you know that are going to come. Wait, Sabo, if this is still about pushing you in the water. Ace slowly backed away from his brother. You know it always was annoying to have to splash water on you before I could hit you so that it hurts. Sabo answered, putting a finger on his chin in a thinking position before he grinned at his brother. Now I don't have to do that anymore. That was all needed to say for Ace to make a run for it. He did not want to face an angry brother with a sea stone weapon. While he ran, he did not notice that his brother did not run after him but stayed back, laying on the ground and holding his stomach while laughing loudly. The raven did only stop when he ran into Thatch, who didn't look very pleased. Where were you? Are you slacking off again? The 4th Division commander asked, a little annoyed. I was looking for Sabo. Thatch sighed, thinking that was a good enough excuse before slinging his arm over Ace's shoulder and slowly leading him somewhere. Oh, you mean the blonde who lay on the field laughing his head off? Ace numbly nodded. Well, I sent him to help out on the 3rd house, so you don't need to fear him and his sea stone-coated pipe. Ace let out a relieved sigh before he looked up, glaring at nothing. He tricked me. Thatch chuckled. Yep, he did. Now store that anger for a later prank and get on working. We don't want to make Marco wait. The raven looked slightly perplexed at his friend, who put a hammer and nails in his hands. Believe me, you really don't want to make him wait. Okay, Ace mumbled, still a little confused, but at least he was working on rebuilding the house. Thatch smiled as he walked away. Suddenly he stopped and looked from left to right. As he saw that everything was clear, he rushed over to some bushes and trees and hid behind them, pulling out a magazine from his back and leaned against a tree. Such a nice day. Who would want to work on such a sunny day? The Whitebeard commander started to read through his magazine for about an hour as he then suddenly felt two dark auras behind him. Thatch paled as he slowly turned his head to see a cowboy hat and a top hat wearer behind him, shadowed and eyes glowing red. Thach, hi, Sabo, Ace, what are you two doing here? The cook felt how sweat rolled down his forehead. He swore those two could be scarier than a pist of Marco. No wait, Thatch shook his head. Scarier than a pist of Jozu but less scary than a pist of Marco. The cook nodded before his attention was back on the brothers. Who is the one slacking off now? Ace growled and Sabo nodded agreeing. Come on boys, this can be cleared very easily. Thatch started before he suddenly run off. I am not sorry. Wait, Thatch, get back here. The two shouted before running after the fourth commander. Garp stomped through the forest until he reaches a small clearing. A rather large man was already sitting there sipping from a huge sake bowl and waved at the vice admiral once he had spotted the man. Glaring, the marine stomped over and sat down in front of the man, slamming two papers right on the ground, even leaving a dent in the ground as he glared up at the pirate before him. Care to explain about this? Grua, ha 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 ha. So these are their new bounty posters? Whitebeard laughed as he glanced at them. The first showed Ace smirking in victory with flames in the background and the fingers of his outstretched hand on fire. On the other was Sabo holding his pipe like he was about to smack the person that took the picture. He was smiling slyly, showing a knowing look in his eyes. The pirate captain was certainly feeling very proud of his children getting such high bounties. Newgate, this is not funny, there are my grandchildren, Garp yelled as he slammed his fist on the ground. Whitebeard just took another sip before he smiled down at the fuming Garp. Relax, Garp. Aren't we here to drink in peace than having you complaining right from the start about them? Garp huffed, crossing his arms. Fire frisked Ace 550.000.000 berry. Iron pipe Sabo 480.000.000 berry. Their bounties only got so high because they joined you, and you just had to make Ace your second commander. The pirate captain couldn't help but smile seeing how a marine that managed to corner Roger a lot of times and was known for his iron punches was now showing a caring side. It was amusing for the old pirate. Do you have any idea how many marines will be after them now? And let's not talk about the number of pirate hunters. Garp argued back, taking a large gulp from his sake and glared at nothing in particular. Garp. Nothing will happen to these two. The marine eyed the pirate skeptical before he let out a long sign. They were supposed to be marines, not some filthy pirates. No offense against you and your crew. Whitebeard only laughed as he took another sip and Garp let out another sigh yet again. Do you really binds would have made them happy? Would give them safety? The pirate asked, causing Garp to glare up at him once more. Even so, I would have been able to keep better watch over them. Garp muttered back and drank from his sake. Those kids are happy when they can live freely and the way they want, Garp. No safety of the world can guarantee all the freedom they have now. Whitebeard smiled as he saw Garp sigh in defeat. If something ever happens to the two, I will personally hunt you and your crew down. Garp answered, mumbling something not understandable before he drank more, and the pirate captain only chuckled. Well, wouldn't it be better if you help us hunting down the poor soul that harmed them instead of me? Both laughed now as they kept on drinking their sake together in peace. I hate you too, Thatch muttered as he hammered nails into a wooden wall. He glanced over at the two grinning brothers on either side of him. You two are devils. We know, Sabo answered simply, holding out a wooden board to him. Some people told us that before. Ace added, also holding out a box of nails to him. Thatch took the wood and a few nails and started to hammer it onto the wall. Doesn't mean you can try burning my ass like Marco does when he is mad. You nearly destroyed my perfect hairstyle. How much time do you even need to keep it like that? Ace mumbled, pointing at his head. I don't really want to know that, Sabo muttered, scratching his head. HMPH. You do just don't know what style is, the cook pouted as suddenly two stomachs growled at the same time and he grinned. Looks like I should go and cook us all some meals. Just when Thatch was about to walk away, the two brothers stopped him and placed their hands on his shoulders, causing the cook to look back at them, and sweat dropped at their grinning faces. Nope, let's go eat somewhere. Ace answered, already dragging Thatch with him, and Sabo followed suit. You still owe us for slacking off earlier. Thatch only stared at them in disbelief before he let out a sign. "Fine, but I will only pay for half of what you eat or I will be broken." The three soon found a nice little bar where they ate and drank. It wasn't much later that a few of Thatch's men joined them with the happy message that they had finally completed all the work on the burned buildings and would be ready to leave soon. It was only then that Thatch suddenly became aware of a new fact. His wallet with all his money was gone. Paling the cook looked over at the two brothers and at the slowly growing pile that was next to the two. How is he going to pay for that? Hurried Thatch looked around in the bar. No one was really paying attention to them, and that made the cook smile a little. He leaned over to the bartender and whispered something in his ear before he slowly inched away from the brothers who were busy arguing about whether or not one of the meals needed more spice. Thatch grinned happily as he sneaked out of the bar without the two noticing and was now walking back to his ship. Just as he was about to go up the plank to it, he heard two loud shouts coming from the town, causing the commander and his division to pale. Thought get the ship going. Slowly he turned around and saw how Ace and Sabo were running in his direction full speed with a lot of townspeople chasing after the two, yelling something about not paid food. They did not just pull a din and dash, did they? Thatch asked no one in particular as he yelled out hurried commands and also ordered someone to drop off a sack of berry on the dock. After all, he didn't want to get in trouble with Marco for not paying food off their own turf that they ate. "What are you doing here again, Yoi?" Marco nearly yelled at Luffy, who sat on the railing of the Moby grinning from ear to ear. "I was bored." Marco's eye twitched. He didn't know how often he had told the kid to stay on the marine ship he came with and not to wander around their ship. The last he needed was a brat disturbing everyone's work. "Just go back. I am sure Bogart is looking for you again, Yoi." Really, Marco had other stuff to worry about than this kid. "But this ship is so huge and awesome," Luffy countered, eyes sparkling. "Look brat, we don't have time for this, so go back to your ship and entertain yourself there, Yoi." Marco was starting to think that he should put a few people on the watch to make sure that the brat would stop coming on the Moby. The rubber boy was about to say something until he fell silent again and his eyes focused on the other side of the deck. Marco raised one eyebrow and shortly glanced over to see Teach mopping the deck. The blonde still couldn't understand why the boy before him reacted like that every time Teach was in his sight. Deciding that now was a good time to find out, he shouted over to Teach to go help out the others cleaning underdeck before he turned to the boy who watched him curious now. "What's with your reaction just now, Yoi?" "Huh?" Confused Luffy tilted his head to the side. "What reaction?" Marco rubbed his eyes. His patience has been growing thin the past days. "You suddenly went all quiet over the simple fact that Teach was in your view, Yoi." "Teach?" Luffy questioned. "Are you trying to teach me something?" The Phoenix was having an inner battle of openly strangle the boy or to just kick him off the ship and seeing how far the boy could fly. Maybe he could beat his captain's record in kicking the boy fairer of the Moby than the old man had made Ace fly off. It was worth a shot, right? Marco shook his head. They had a drinking sake in peace deal with Garp. He shouldn't act against it even if it meant not kicking or strangling the boy before him. The guy with black hair, black bandana, white shirt, yellow slash and black trousers who was mopping the deck just a few minutes ago, Yoi. Marco was sure that he must have described Teach detailed enough for the kid to understand who he meant, and lucky enough the boy seemed to realize who he meant. Luffy was moving around a little uncomfortable on his seat on the railing as he finally understood who Marco meant. He honestly didn't really know what to answer. Why did he feel uncomfortable around that guy? The rubber boy didn't really know. He doesn't feel right. Marco eyed the boy. Doesn't feel right? Luffy only nodded, his eyes focused on the ground as he tried to understand himself why. He knew that the feeling was similar to when he met Blue Jam or that huge man in the red suit. But he still couldn't explain it. Marco knew he wouldn't get more out of the kid, but it still irritated him. What did he mean with Teach doesn't feel right? Was there something they didn't see in him? Marco let out an irritated sigh. This was the last thing he needed, more to think about and to worry about. He didn't want to doubt one of his brothers, but Teach always had been one of the less noticeable members. Now that he thought about it, he didn't even know all too much about him. Well, besides his like for cherry pies. Marco was sure that he would start to keep an eye on him from now on. Even if he didn't like it, the Phoenix was sure that the boy must have seen something they didn't. While Marco was deep in thoughts, he didn't notice how Luffy started to sniff the air and drooled when he recognized the smell of grilled meat. Following his nose, the rubber boy leaned over the railing and looked down at the marine ship. Bogart noticed the rubber boy's missing, but instead of him searching for the boy, he thought off a new way to bring the kid back. He asked their chief to cook up some grilled meat and then let the door to the kitchen open, causing the smell to be carried away by the wind. For once, Bogart's scowl was replaced by a smirk as he watched the rubber boy run through the door and stuff his face with the laid-out bait. The Marine shook his head as he watched the boy eat. He really was predictable if you knew the rubber boy well enough, at least sometimes. Marine? Never. Chapter 14. Luffy leaned against the railing as he looked up at the huge building before him. He remembered that Garp had said something about a meeting he would have to attend by the headquarters, but he didn't tell him about what it was. This resulted in Luffy being stuck on Garp's marine ship. Curious, the rubber boy watched how other ships docked on and vice admirals from everywhere got off their ships. Luffy thought that some of them looked rather funny. One was even wearing something that looked awfully a lot like his grandfather's dog hat. Then there were one who wore a metal mask and another that wore something like a skull with red hair attached to it. Luffy couldn't help but think that Marines were weird. His eyes then spotted something that looked like a swimming coffin with candles and a seat in the middle. The rubber boy's eyes started to sparkle as he looked up at the sky, seeing someone walking in the air. How does he do that? Bogart looked up to see what the boy was looking at and frowned. He knew what the meeting was about. It didn't come often that vice admirals, the fleet admiral and the Shichibukai held a meeting after all. The reason was probably about King of the Sea Jinbei. 3 days ago, Garp had gotten a letter about him resigning as one of the Shichibukai. It was only a matter of time from then when Fleet Admiral Sengoku would call out the meeting. Bogart turned back to look at the rubber boy only to find him missing. A sigh escaped the Marine as he let his gaze wander around the deck. When he didn't spot him, walked over to the railing, and indeed, Luffy was by the coffin looking like boat and was curiously poking it. Really, Bogart was hoping that right now the Shichibukai that boat belonged to wouldn't come by to see the boy doing that. He didn't know how he should explain to Garp that his grandson was sliced into pieces because he touched the boat of a Shichibukai. The Marine let out a sigh as he went to follow the boy to bring him back to the ship, only to discover that he was out of sight once again. Muttering out a small curse, Bogart went to search for the missing rubber boy. Honestly, the boy was getting into trouble way too often. He felt like he should ask Vice Admiral Garp for a raise of payment. Bogart heard a crash in the distance and rubbed his eyes. He surely was not paid enough. Marco paced from one side of the deck to the other side of the deck. It had been 4 days already since Garp had left again. 8 days since he had sent Ace and Sabo to deliver the eternal pose to Thatch. 10 days since Thatch had left for his mission. And he still hadn't heard anything from them. He really was going to strangle one of three, and then he would make sure that they knew how to use a freaking Den Mushi. Next to that, he had been watching Teach for a while, and whatever it was the boy had seen, he didn't see it. The man was acting like always, doing his task and chores, eating cherry pies and slacking off when he thought no one was watching. The only thing Marco found out was that his brother could eat as much cherry pies as Ace and Sabo could eat normally. Marco calmed down already. Vista quietly mumbled, fearing the Phoenix's fury but also getting irritated by the fact that this was the 50th time Marco walked past him. The blonde only shortly glared at Vista before his attention was caught by Haruta's shout. "Look, Thatch is finally back." A relieved sigh escaped Marco's lips before he walked over to the railing where Thatch and the two brothers climbed over, grinning while getting welcomes from everyone else. The blonde had walked up to them, and right when the three thought he would welcome them warmly, he connected his fist with their stomachs. "Welcome back. What took you guys so long? And don't you guys know how to use a Den Mushi, yoi?" Thatch groaned loudly as he muttered, "I knew I forgot something." "No shit," Ace and Sabo muttered, agreeing. Marco only smiled and helped the three up again. "It's good to have you guys back anyway, yoi." "It's good to be back," Thatch answered as he then pulled out a small wooden box from behind his back. "Now guess what I found." With a glance at Ace, he then added, "And don't say some portal to another world." "Hey, you said guess that time," Ace defended himself as everyone else laughed. "Well, what did you find, yoi?" Marco asked, getting back to topic. "A devil fruit," Thatch nearly shouted as he held up the fruit from its box. Everyone complimented him and asked how he found it and if he knew what powers it held, to which the cook always laughed and explained that he was going to find out about that and then he would decide if he would sell it or eat it. Marco smiled at Thatch's decision until he noticed Sabo looking a little uncomfortable. The blonde was leaning against the railing like he did days before, but this time he didn't look out to the sea but around deck, his eyes already telling that he was lost in his thoughts. "What's wrong, Yoi?" Sabo looked up stunned at Marco before he frowned, looking down at his feet. "The same feeling you had days ago, Yoi?" the 1st Division commander asked again, and Sabo furrowed his eyebrows. "No, it's different. The one I had before disappeared shortly before we went after Thatch. This one is new." Marco nodded, his eyes wandering over the deck before they landed on Teach. "Think something is going to happen?" Sabo shook his head as he also started to watch the rest of the crew, his eyes landing on Thatch, Namur, Vista, Haruta, Izo and Ace joking around of what powers the devil fruit holds. "It's probably nothing again. I must have eaten something wrong. I wouldn't bet on that," Marco muttered quietly. Sabo was about to leave and glanced over to Marco, noticing that he had his eyes slightly narrowed. Following his line of sight, Sabo was now looking at Teach. To his surprise, he recognized the look of shock and surprise in the man's eyes that were solemnly focused on the devil fruit in Thatch's hands. Confused, the younger blonde walked over to his friends and crewmates, joining their talk about the devil fruit. His feeling forgotten and the thought about Teach's reactions pushed to the back of his mind. It was only late at night that Sabo regretted forgetting about his bad feeling. The blonde wasn't able to sleep, so he took a walk around the ship. He wanted to go on deck to look at the sky a little, but a huge storm was preventing him from it. The thunder and heavy rain hitting the deck echoed through the Moby. For once, Sabo was wondering how the hell his crewmates managed to sleep right now. Even though the storm was raging, Sabo still decided to go on deck at least once to breathe in some fresh air. Just as he opened the door, a flash of light from a lightning illuminated the darkness on deck, and Sabo saw the shadow of a person running on the opposite of the deck. Thinking someone managed to sneak on the ship, Sabo followed the person to the lifeboats. The darkness of the night made it difficult for him to get a clearer view of the person, but he could make out that he had a rather large figure. Or in other words, Sabo thought that this person was pretty fat. Sabo ducked behind a corner as he noticed that the person was hurriedly looking around if anyone was near. For a moment the blonde cursed that he didn't take his pipe with him. If this really was an enemy, he would have no weapons to fight him. Another flash of light illuminated the darkness and Sabo's breath hitched as he recognized Teach and then the fruit he was holding in his hands. But before he could go and ask why he had it, Teach jumped over the railing into one of the lifeboats he had led down. Sabo cursed as he ran to the railing but saw that Teach was already carried away by the waves of the storm. A sick feeling started to form in Sabo's stomach and he ran off to the commander quarters. On his way he saw drops of blood on the ground and he paled. His pace fasted and he ran faster than he had ever before. Finally he reached Thatch's room and saw how the door was leniently leaning on the doorframe as he entered the room. All color was drained from his face as he saw the amount on blood on the ground and one of his best friends lying in the middle of the puddle. "Thought ch," Sabo yelled loudly, falling to his knees next to his friend. Slowly, with shaking hands, Sabo inspected Thatch's wound. His eyes watered slightly as he saw that he was stabbed in the back several times and in places that were meant to be deathly. Sabo's eyes glanced around the room. His friend had already lost a good amount of blood. The blonde shook his head. His shaking hands fisted before he opened them again. He took off his coat and ripped it into pieces and he pressed them against Thatch's wounds, trying to stop the flow of blood. It was then that he noticed the hurried steps on the hallway. But Sabo was focused on his task of stopping the bleeding. He didn't notice how Marco and Ace run into the room, both shocked. He didn't see how Ace ran up to get the doctors of their ship. He didn't even see how Marco helped him stopping bleeding and shouted out commands to others who joined them. Only when Izo slowly removed Sabo's hands from Thatch and lead him over to Ace, reality came back to him. "Thatch, is he going to be okay? Will he make it?" Sabo asked, his voice thick with worry. Ace knew the look in Sabo's eyes. He had seen a similar look before. "I don't know," Ace mumbled quietly. He watched how his brother's arms hung numble down. Slowly he led Sabo to the washing room and made him wash off the blood on his hands. Thankfully Izo brought them new clothing. Having his brother cleaned up, the two joined the rest of the crew who waited before the medical wing. He saw Marco and Whitebeard looking at them and shook his head, telling them to wait before they questioned Sabo of what happened. But Sabo walked up to Whitebeard, his eyes not once looking at him, but Ace could see him glaring down at the ground. There is a possibility that Teach did this to Thatch. I saw him leave with the devil fruit Thatch had. Everyone looked shocked at Sabo, who slid down the wall he leaned against. The blonde rubbed his face with his hands and muttered something before him. Whitebeard let out a long sigh before he placed his large hand comforting on the blonde's head. Don't blame yourself. No one could have known this was going to happen. For now we need to regroup and to see if Teach is indeed missing. Whitebeard looked over to Marco, who nodded in understanding and walked off. Ace glanced at his brother, who sat on the ground. Sabo's eyes were now fixed on his hands. Ace turned to glare at the wall opposite him. Questions raged in his head, all unanswered. He fisted his hands on either side of him. He couldn't let this slide. Teach was from his division, his responsibility. He would make him pay for hurting one of his family. Sabo noticed how Ace walked away, his hands fisted and a mad look in his eyes. The blonde then looked down at his hands. Even thought they had made him clean himself, he still saw the blood on them. Thatch's blood. The blonde closed his eyes. Could he have changed things if he hadn't dismissed his feeling and the look on Teach's face? Could he have prevented what happened to Thatch? He didn't know, but he knew that there was something else he could prevent now. Sabo glanced one last time at the door, where Thatch was getting treaded behind it, and walked off to follow his brother. Luffy peeked through a door. He didn't dare to enter it. The rubber boy may be an idiot at times, but even he didn't fail to notice the tense mood in the room before him. He glanced over at the two large figures sitting across from each other. One looked extremely pale, the other reminded him a lot of a bear. On a couch behind them were two other figures. One carried a large cross on his back. He wore a black coat and hat. The other was blonde and wearing something that was similar to pink feathers around his neck. All in all, none of them were wearing anything marine-like. It was then that Luffy noticed how two marines were engaged in a sword fight, attacking each other while yelling that they didn't mean to do that. Confused, Luffy looked around more and saw how the blonde man moved his fingers every time one of the marines attacked the other. The rubber boy was sure that it was the blonde man's doing that they acted like that. Luffy glared as he saw that no one seemed to want to stop him. Just as the rubber boy was about to enter the room, he was pushed aside gently and the door fully opened. Surprised, he looked up to see Fleet Admiral Sengoku smiling down at him. I believe you shouldn't be here, boy. I was bored, so I went to explore a little. Luffy simply answered, honesty written in his eyes. Sengoku patted the boy's head, causing Luffy to mutter out something about stop touching his hat. I would suggest you to go back to Garp's ship, before your grandfather sees you here. Sengoku chuckled as he watched the boy pale. The Fleet Admiral looked inside the room to see that his presence was noticed. Sengoku noticed how Hawkeye watched the boy with mild interest while the rest of the present Shichibukai ignored him or didn't show any interest. Waving one last time, Sengoku closed the door behind him and locked Luffy completely out of the room. Luffy stared at the door a while longer before he reluctantly walked away from it. He was still curious about who these people were. The rubber boy wanted to know more, but yet again it seemed that he wasn't allowed to. Glancing around, Luffy tried to find something else to pass the time, already forgetting that his grandfather will punish him if he doesn't return to the ship soon. The boy's eyes landed on a long wall with wanted posters just like the ones he saw in Kuzan's base. Grinning, he decided to look for the ones of his brothers. He was sure they must have gotten a bounty poster by now. Ace was getting ready to take off. He had packed his little backpack and was now walking over to where the striker was tied to. He stopped as he saw someone leaning against the railing next to the rope. You are not going to stop me, Sabo. Ace muttered, his eyes glaring out at the raging sea. Teach is my responsibility. Sabo shook his head as he crossed his arms, his head covering his eyes. I know, but Thatch wasn't only your friend. Ace glared at his blonde brother. Teach was my fucking responsibility. He was a member of my division. I should have kept a better eye on him. I should have fucking known what he was planning. Language, Ace. Sabo only answered as he sighed. I don't fucking care, Ace yelled loudly. Get out of my way, Sabo, now. Don't you think I am mad too? Sabo asked quietly. I was there. I saw him leave. I found Thatch. Don't you think I want to go after him just as much as you want to? Ace was quiet as he looked down. Don't be selfish now, Ace. This isn't some animal or low pirate we can hunt down for nearly killing Luffy. This is someone who managed to badly injure a commander of the Whitebeard pirates. Ace looked up, glaring at Sabo again and trying to get past him to the rope. I can take him on. I don't care how strong he is. Ace was cut off as hard metal connected with his head and threw him on the ground. He felt how the metal pressed against his chest, pinning him onto the ground and slowly draining his strength. For heaven's sake, fucking think for once, Sabo yelled. How do you think Oyaji feels? Marco feels? Everyone here feels? Ace stared stunned up at his brother. This isn't some stupid joke, Ace. Thatch is fighting for his life and you want to leave now? How the fuck do you think Oyaji will take it? He already lost Teach's son. Thatch is maybe going to die and you freaking want to leave the Moby now? Ace didn't know what to answer. Sabo rarely yelled at him. He felt ashamed that he didn't thought of everyone else and how they would feel. How could he be so stupid? Sure, he wanted to go after Teach so badly, but right now, his family needed him more. Do you understand now? Sabo asked, calmer, lifting his pipe of Ace and To, his brother. Thatch is the one that needs us. We can go after Teach some other time, but being here is more important now. Yay, sorry about that. Let's go back. Ace mumbled quietly, not meeting Sabo's eyes. Are you going to be alright? I have 2 idiot brothers and a family to look after. Sabo answered, a small smile on his lips as he patted Ace's shoulder. Marco, who had quietly watched the exchange of the brothers, smiled relieved as he walked up to them. He was about to stop them when he saw Sabo giving Ace a good blow on the head with his pipe, but he stopped once he heard the blonde's words. The 1st Division commander shook his head as he walked over to them. I have been looking for you too. He started, causing the 2 to finally notice him. Everyone gathered in the hall of the medical wing. Any news on how Thatch is? Ace asked as both brothers looked hopefully at Marco. Marco looked at them blankly for a while, causing an unsettling feeling in their stomachs. But then Marco grinned happily from ear to ear. The 2 looked at him confused and slightly scared. The idiot is going to be okay.